Hello and welcome to the program People, Politics and Power. I am Imonia Marire. The Nigeria Police Pension Bill, currently before the National Assembly, has ignited fresh debate over the future of pension administration in the country, particularly as it affects one of Nigeria's most vital security institutions. At the heart of the bill is the proposition to establish an independent police pension board, effectively removing the Nigeria Police Force from the contributory pension scheme managed by the National Pension Commission, PENCOM, and reverting to a tailored, self-managed pension arrangement. Now, proponents argue that the bill is long overdue. They cite the peculiar and high-risk nature of police work, the inadequacy of current pension benefits under the contributory pension scheme, and the recurrent reports of hardship and destitution among retired officers. The new board, they claim, would guarantee more dignified and secure retirement benefits, ensure timely payments, and restore morale within the force. However, critics warn that the bill, while well-intentioned, may reverse pension reforms that were instituted to promote transparency, sustainability, and professional management. There are concerns about the potential duplication of bureaucracies, fiscal risks to the national treasury, and the re-emergence of the corruption and mismanagement that marred the old defined benefit scheme. That was before the 2024 reforms. Now, detractors also worry that a proliferation of sector-specific pension boards could fragment the system and weaken oversight. As the bill makes its way through legislative scrutiny, the nation stands at a policy crossroads. How to balance the urgent need to protect the welfare of security personnel with the imperative to uphold accountability and sustainability in pension administration. The eventual outcome will have implications not just for the police, but for broader public sector pension governance in Nigeria. This is our focus on this edition of the program. We shall interrogate the bill that has gone through second reading in the National Assembly to ensure that any final legislation promotes fairness, sustainability, and the well-being of police personnel without compromising broad national interest in pension governance. And we have brought together pension administrators, public affairs analysts, and, of course, persons who are concerned about the administration of the pension scheme in Nigeria. So first, from my immediate right is Mr. Jide Olatuyi. Mr. Olatuyi is the Executive Director, Policy Consult. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having
time
me.
to join us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We're also joined in the studio by Mojid Dairu, a public intellectual and a public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for finding time to join us. We're also joined virtually online from Lagos by Oguche Aguda. Mr. Aguda is the CEO, Pension Fund Operators Association. Mr. Aguda, thank you so much for finding time to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. And we have also joining us Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, communication specialist at the Base University here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Prof, thank you for finding time to join us.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Great. It's good to have all of you here. We'll go on a short break, and when we return, we'll be diving straight into our discussion.
Nigeria of our dream, the Nigeria we need, is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on People, politics and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, politics and power on AIT.
Thank you so much for staying with us, People, Politics and Power, and we're looking at the Nigeria Police Pension Board Bill that is currently before the National Assembly. That bill has passed second reading, but of course, it's generating a lot of debate and discussions around pension fund administration in Nigeria. Mr. Latuyi, let's begin with you and from this perspective. Well, why do we, in any case, have a pension scheme in the first place?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I think one of the reasons why there's the importance, there's need for, the importance around, the pension scheme is to guarantee protection for people after their long years of service, working for government or working in the private sector, so that at the end of their, service, when they are retired or left the service, they continue to live and as well survive based on, opportunity to draw from the pension arrangements that can then accrue to them after they have left service, so that they can also be able to maybe feed themselves, feed their family, and do some other important economic activities that they might want to be involved in. So it is important for pension schemes to be consolidated enough to meet not only the economic strength of retired workers, but also to be able to sustain their livelihood even after their years of service.
So, Mr. Oguda, let's bring you in. You are an expert in pension administration. What is the difference between the contributory pension scheme and what this bill seeks to set up for the police force? Mr. Oguda, can you hear us? It does appear that Mr. Oguda is not hearing us, but let me come back here to the studio, Mr. Dairu. Do you understand the difference between the contributory pension fund and what the new bill seeks to set up specifically for the police?
Basically, under the old defined benefit scheme, which predated the 2004 Pension Reform Act, it was a statutory responsibility of the government, in this case, to pay pensions that are fixed at certain thresholds after retirement. And so, usually, pensions are funded from consolidated revenue funds through budgeting systems. But when that became problematic because of the unsustainability and the unaffordability of the growing number of pensioners and the burden, the financial burden on government, of course, you are a living witness. It became mired in a lot of inefficiencies, inadequacies, and of course, corruption crept in too. Yeah. So people will serve government for between 35 years and 60 years of age, and retire into pension because of the mismanagement of this, form of pension system. And so it was decided that probably we should adopt what was the global best practice at the time, which is contributory, a contributory system of pension, where deductions are made from employee salaries while they are still in service, are remitted by the employers to a designated pension fund administrator. Usually it is expected that the PFA will invest these funds to generate profit enough now to sustain pension payment going forward. So the sustainability aspect of this reform, which resulted into the contributory pension scheme, was believed it will eliminate some of the challenges of the old system. And so we've been on that trajectory. A lot of federal government agencies have migrated to the contributory pension scheme. Some states are even migrating. I understand that Kogi State, for instance, is set to migrate to the contributory pension scheme. It's not without its challenges. It's not without its downsides. But I think inherently within that framework of the contributory pension scheme are also mechanisms that can adjust reforms going forward. And so that is the basic difference between the CPS and the defined benefit scheme. That's the difference. So government bears sole responsibility for the defined benefit scheme, while the contributory pension scheme is like workers are going to contribute money and the employers will deduct and remit. So like I said earlier, the PFAs are supposed to actually use that to invest and generate revenue enough to cover the cost of capital and return dividend in form of payment of pension. For instance, my interest to know this. The British PFAs invest heavily, for example, in oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. So most of these British companies, including Royal Dutch Shell and Co., maximizes the use of British PFA funds for their offshore and overseas investment activities. And so when they generate some of those big profits that they declare every year, it directly benefits pensioners. So that is what is expected of the Nigerian system too.
In other words, the contributory pension scheme appear to have some kind of guarantees, long-term guarantees.
Sustainability.
Okay.
Sustainability guarantees and some level of affordability. Yes.
All right. I hope that we are able to reconnect with Mr. Aguda now. Mr. Oguche Aguda, are you with us?
I can hear you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Right. You are a pension administrator, and I need you to weigh in at this point in time what the differences are between the contributory pension scheme and the defined benefits scheme.
All right. The gentleman in the studio, I didn't really get his name, did a very good job of trying to break it down.
Mr. Dairu.
But what I will add is that, yes, Mr. Dahiru, so there are benefits and there are also challenges to both models. But I think it's important to look at the model that we are in. If you look at Section 14 of the bill, the police pension bill that is being looked at, Section 14 says they shall be charged on and paid out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation all such sums of money as may from time to time be granted by the federal government by way of pensions and gratuity. And this speaks to the points that Mr. Dahiru made. So the pensions under the defined benefit scheme and where the police want to go to is meant to be charged directly from the consolidated revenue of the federal government. The challenge is, what if the federal government doesn't have those funds? What if it has it this year, it doesn't have it in 3 years' time? What if it has it in 3 years' time, doesn't have it in 5 years' time? And that was why we had the challenges before that Mr. Deherida alluded to that made us move to the contributory pension scheme. So what this bill is seeking to do is to move the police back to public pension management. That is like as if, you are now using GSM and you want to move back to NITEL, right? So right now, the pensions are managed by pension fund administrators, which are private sector managed companies. And because of that, there is a level of transparency, there is a level of professionalism, but if you move it back to police pension boards, which number one are dependent on the budgetary allocations from the government, which, as we know, is not stable. As the police force or as the civil service begins to expand, the government's pension bill begins to expand. It's not just a Nigerian problem, by the way. A number of countries are facing this, whereby, as their civil service expands, those that are on the defined benefit scheme, then it becomes unsustainable, right? But with the contributory pension scheme, it's contributed from your salary whilst you are working. The privately managed pension administrators are meant to manage the funds so that when you retire, those funds you've contributed have yielded a return. And then when you retire, there's money to be able to pay you until you meet your maker. So I'll just add to what Mr. Dahiru said, but he did a brilliant job of laying the foundation, and I hope I've been able to add some more to be able to give your viewers and all others watching a bit of context.
In other words, this defined benefit scheme will depend entirely on provision from the consolidated revenue fund of the federal government.
Yes, you are correct. You are correct.
Whereas the contributory pension scheme it's both ways, both from the employer, the expected beneficiary.
Employee?
Yeah, that's the
Yes.
employee. There's a greater guarantee from that scheme than as it
Yes,
is from the defined benefit scheme.
you're very correct, sir. And one of the things I want you and your viewers to know is that if you look, I mean, just recently, the Nigerian Labour Congress was making some noise that they don't want to move wages and salaries to out of the exclusive list because they are not sure whether the state governments will pay. We see oftentimes university lecturers, they are trying to protest. We see medical staff trying to protest. So the government does not have enough money to meet its current obligations. And then we want to add new obligations. So what that means is that if the police move out, then they are at the mercy of whether the government has money. As a matter of fact, the IG of police said recently about this bill that the police that are agitating need to be aware of where they are going. He spoke in parables. We need to be sure that we're not moving from fry pan to fire. Do we know where we are going to? He mentioned. And that is something that I think we need to keep in view where we are asking to go to, do we know where we are going to? Yes, there might be some promise, but what if the money doesn't come? Then we go back to the dark ages. So that's one thing I want to make clear.
Well, thank you very much for that very solid foundation, Mr. Aguda. The reason we are having this discussion is to be able to clearly inform our lawmakers who are seized of this bill right now, who are dealing with it, to have all sides to the arguments that are being made so that when they do make a law, the law will be one that is properly informed by the views of Nigerians and of course professionals like all of you who are here. Let me bring in Professor Adeni at this point. Now, a lot has been said about what went wrong with the previous defined benefit scheme. Before the 2004 movement or reforms that brought PENCOM on board. Now, there were abuses and there were, of course, a lot of inadequacies. Now, what mechanisms can be put in place at this point in time to prevent that kind of corruption that attended the previous defined benefit scheme and the mismanagement that went with it and the abuses that went with it?
Well, that's a very fundamental question, Mark. I think we may not be able to isolate the corruption, as it could have, as it afflicted the defined benefit scheme, from the general conception of corruption, the global view of corruption that we have within the Nigerian ecosystem. Of course, we know why the system is corrupt, why we are witnesses to maladministration and misappropriation, because the institutions are weak. And when institutions are weak, control mechanisms are practically absent. And of course, we see, of course, leaders, like we always say, they're also inclined, to prebendalism. The rapacity is very, very obvious, where there are no control systems. And of course, even when there are control systems, where there are apprehensions, like we often see every once in a while, the prosecution and the sanctioning process is also weak. And in very rare events, very rare occasions where there are sanctions, implementation is also very, very poor. And so if there's no implementation, if there are sanctions and there's no proper execution, of course, there's no deterrence. And anyone that is coming after is not scared of repeating the missteps of a previous person, as the case could be. So for us to be able to deal with corruption from the global Nigerian perspective onto the defined benefit system, we have to be concerned about institutional strengthening, right? Institutional strengthening so that the average person, working towards growing the institutions, in the institutions as the case could be, whether they are soft or hard, soft in terms of the law and hard in terms of the physical facilities that are meant to be corrective. If we have every individual man in every section, if they are up to the mark in their task, if there's a sense of commitment, a sense of patriotism and nationalism, perhaps we could enhance or engender the productivity of these institutions, and we can begin to deal with the question of corruption gradually. And of course, it's also important to add that maybe leaders at different levels, not just at governance level, maybe at the level of both the private sector. They also need some kind of ethical reorientation, ethical commitment and dedication, to the collectivity represented in the Nigerian nation. And of course, if these pieces in the jigsaw are not well fit, we'll continue to talk about corruption forever, and we'll be able to deal with um, different shades of of corruption in the way they manifest at different sectors, like it manifested again in the defined pension scheme, leading us to exiting it some 20 years ago. And I listened very carefully to the experts that spoke before me, and I appreciated the movement. I was able to appreciate the movement we had. Getting to about 20 years ago now, where we thought that through strengthening institution, being creative, being innovative, with the contributory pension scheme, we will have been exiting the malaise that bedeviled the previous one. And nearly 20 years after, it may not be salutary for us to be thinking of going backwards, considering the many downsides, that befell it, which triggered discussions around moving away from the defined pension scheme. We understand, if I may say, that institutions like the police, for instance, they play a critical role in the Nigerian, in every society, by the way, because police is in a way can be synonymous with guaranteeing peace and order and prosperity by extension. Okay, and of course, when people have served their country in a dedicated way, in their post-service year, they need some safety nets. They need to be assured that there's life after service, and it creates some kind of emotional stability, psychological balance that could also help them to be much more efficient, even when they are in service before they eventually exit service. But in doing that, we also have to look at the broader picture, the broader picture of which system will work better for me than the other. Did the last one work well? It came with so many downsides, as like the expert from Lagos highlighted. Now, is it salutary in the 21st century for us to go back to those downsides? Are we not supposed to be making progress? And if there are weaknesses, will we not rather seek ways of rectifying those weaknesses, of remedying them, rather than imagining a radical or maybe a drastic reaction of completely moving out? If there's a move out, as it's being contemplated in the bill, do we not envisage a situation where other agencies will be thinking of also exiting? And of course, if we're having more agencies exiting the contributory pension scheme, what's going to happen eventually to the idea, as initiated in the first instance? Will there not be a collapse? And that's the point again about, the brain of our development. Oftentimes, we are we're very reluctant to imagine reform, to imagine maintaining structures that we have. Oftentimes, we just think of starting some things anew. But in starting things anew, we need a little more introspection, a little more critical thinking, not to be swayed by emotions and sentiments that may not do us any good at the level of empiricism, which governance and the progress of an entity, which a country is, actually requires, as the case could be, Mark.
Thank you, Prof. Let me bring in Mr. Olatuyi now. The Nigeria Police Force is one of government agencies that has perhaps the largest workforce in the country today.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm just wondering why we are, as a country, we're always in the habit of moving away from what works to something we have tried before that failed, and why we are moving back to that system that failed. The contributory pension scheme appears to be working well. Many other government agencies and parastatals are keyed into it. But here the police is moving away, or wants to move away from it to their own defined pension scheme, given their large numbers. Now, first, what is the cost implication of this shift?
Well, thank you very much again. Yes, I want to start from where Professor Adeni, concluded when he alluded to the, and of course, Mr. Seju here, how he has, analyzed how the pension scheme, I mean, the contributory pension scheme is working, and it's a great improvement over the old scheme. We in this Abuja, I don't know, 20, 21 years ago, we used to witness how not even people only in the police sector, but even people that, were in the military sector, around Area 10, police headquarters, how many of them that have, retired, and you see the gory sight of them, hanging around the police headquarters because of failure of the system, weak institutions, unattended, expectations of members of the police force who have retired. They cannot feed themselves, they cannot feed their family, they cannot live well. And you see them coming old. Some of them will die on the queue. Some of them faint, and you don't see appropriate, health attention, for them at that time. And that was under the old, pension scheme, defined benefit scheme, the defined benefit scheme. Now that necessitated, like everybody has said, the contributory pension scheme. Not only the police, the NNPC, the FCC, the CBN, all of them were on this, on this scheme. And like you have pointed out now, yes, the police force happens to be one of the largest workforce in Nigeria. And then people keep on saying that even though they are the largest, but they are not even sufficient enough to, secure, the lives and properties of Nigerians that are over 200 and something million. And now, if they have been benefiting, seriously from the contributory pension scheme, and it's working well, though yes, we admit that there are some challenges, which we believe that these challenges should be rather look into, review them and see how they can improve the contributory pension scheme, rather than introducing the old model that was not working. So if I, as a police person, I see a system working, and it is now reverted to the old system that was not working, that demoralizes me. That will not allow me to be motivated to perform my role, my function, even as a security agent. And we are already faced with insecurity, high level of insecurity in Nigeria. Probably almost every state in this country is facing different levels of insecurity or the other. So I don't think a reversal to the old scheme will benefit anybody. It will not benefit the individual, it will not benefit our institutions, it will not benefit even the political class. So I think that, in effect, what we should, instead of looking at the police pension board bill that they want to reintroduce back into the system, I would rather that we look at the current system of the contributory pension scheme and see how it can serve the police force better. Yes, because under the police pension, the contributory pension fund scheme for the police, that is being managed by the police revenue limited, NPF fund, that is working, and we are all seeing the effect of it now. It's easier for you to do the contribution after your retirement. You now do the calculation, and see what you benefit till the time when you are called to glory. And yes, it motivates, so we need to do more. That's what I think should be the starting point moving forward.
Mr. Dairo, I was just thinking, with this board, if it goes through and is passed and assented to by the president, will the board be subject to PENCOM regulations or control, or even independent audits?
That is quite debatable, because it's not going to be established under the PENCOM Act,
okay,
which established the creation of PFAs in order to manage the contributory pension scheme form of pension management. Again, let's not lose sight of the fact that there are issues concerning the welfare of the police officers and men and their pension, which may have necessitated the intention, the well-intentioned gravitation towards the old system. So what are those challenges? They are basic challenges. There is a concern among retired police officers and men that they are not earning enough from this contributory pension scheme. That is, the pay is paltry, and so that is why they want to adopt the old system where their monthly retirement benefit or their pension will be pegged at 40% of their total emolument while they were in service. So that looks very attractive to a lot of them. But what we are arguing here is, as well-intentioned as this is, and for me, and I'm sure all of us on this panel, we want our officers and men to retire in dignity because it is crucial to national security. In fact, the image of any country in the world is the image of the police.
Yeah.
So it's something that's of concern to us.
So the 40% that they are looking at
is what appears to be the
as
attraction.
against the current 18% or
Exactly.
thereabout.
Now,
yes.
but what we're talking about here is this. That 40% is as sure as death, elusive.
It's not even 18%, it's 10% of, their current, So the argument is that if it is possible, whether that percent can be increased, whether that 10% can be increased to 20%.
I
No,
think there's
that is
another
under,
8% somewhere
under-
else.
Exactly.
Yes.
What I'm just saying is, even if it's 100% you
Yes.
want to present under this new bill,
Yeah.
it is as sure as death that it is elusive. It's unimplementable. Nigeria is not even in a position at all.
To implement that, yeah.
As we speak, the police is underfunded in terms of recurrent expenditure, underpaid, under-equipped. In fact, I'll give you a story. Some time ago, about 3 days ago, I presided over a session of a community police discourse. And the then retiring DPO of Kubwa Division in Abuja here said because he was retiring soon, he can say the truth, that throughout that year, could that event happened in December, that the total amount of money that was released to him to fuel the vehicles in the division was 7,000 naira.
Hey.
7,000 naira.
You are not serious.
I'm very serious. 7,000 naira to fuel his vehicles at that division. So such an institution cannot be entrusted with an important issue such as the pension of retired officers and men, no matter how lucrative it looks like on paper. So what is the way out? I'm sure all of us here would desire a better retirement benefit for our dedicated officers and men. What do we do? Let us go back to the Pension Act, the Reform Act of 2004, as amended in 2014. There are enormous, too many mechanisms inherent that can improve the pension payment. That's the basic question to officers. One of the things to do on the government side is to increase the salary of serving personnel.
Yes.
Because the percentage of payment is a function of what you retire.
Yes.
So we need to increase. That is what the government can do. When the government does that, it will have killed two birds with one stone. That increment will now impact positively during the pension years of the same people that are waiting care of when they were in service. And the police force itself, the management of the police force, can also take advantage of their Police Act of 2020 to set aside funds from the internally generated revenue. And there's one source of revenue for the government or for the police that must be harnessed now. Nigeria is having security challenges. We want it to end as soon as possible. However, that has created an opportunity for security services providers like the Nigerian Police Force. So the deployment of police force for VIP and special duties must now be formalized and properly commercialized so it can enhance their IGR, from which they can now deploy adequate resources to augment retirement benefits for the officers and men, as is the case with the FRSC. The FRSC is a revenue-generating entity. It dedicates 40% of its revenues, 40%, to the welfare of retirees and pensions augmentation. So these things can be done now without embarking on a journey that is clearly unsustainable, unaffordable, in fact, give you out to that's the country, unimplementable. Do you know that the government is actually borrowing funds now, according to its borrowing plan, to pay pensions, to pay salaries, to pay gratuity? It cannot accommodate additional burden of paying pensions all by itself. just because somebody is not getting what they think is adequate now. Well, we know it's not adequate. Nobody is living in denial of that. But we're saying the best way to go about it is to be ingenious, using the existing framework that is progressive in nature to make it even more progressive as you reform forward, not reform backwards.
You know, Mr. Aguda, let's bring you in. Now, a lot has been said, and I'm just wondering how this bill, if it does say true, how it will affect uniformity in the system. At the moment, the contributory pension scheme appears to be uniform across board, and now the police pension bill seeks to move away from that. There is a concern that other government agencies might take advantage of this if this becomes successful, to also want to move away. And here we are seeking to have a uniform law for all who work for government. So how is this likely to affect that?
Thanks. Thank you, sir, for that question. But before I go on, I just want to acknowledge what Prof. Adeni said, you know, about looking at things logically without bringing emotion. And I think Mr. Dahiru, who is in your station, has helped to bring some logic in all of this. So I want to add to that to say, you know, if we look at this logically, people that are agitating, I ask, have you seen staff of the CBN protesting that they want to get out of the CPS? They are also under the CPS. Have you seen staff of the NNPC? Have you seen staff of the FIRS? Have you seen staff of SEC, of NDIC? These are also under the CPS. Why are they not protesting that the pensions are small and they want to move back to the former portion? It's because of the thing Mr. Hairu said. Number one is the salary. Your pensions is dependent on your salary. Even if you're on the defined benefit scheme, your pension.
Mr. Aguda, are you with us? Okay, we appear to have lost a signal from Mr. Aguda. Prof, would you want to, in fact, before I go to Prof, take up that issue, this whole issue of a uniformed pension scheme across board? He just talked about the CBN, the NMPC,
like was trying to point out,
FRSC,
they're not complaining.
Yes.
They're comfortable with it. They
So
retire into comfort.
why this move to want to extricate
Because
or exit
the Nigerian police
police
force and its leadership are not doing what these other agencies are doing. That is, first, they are paying good salaries. Because your pension is a function of your salary. It's a percentage of your salary, as stipulated by either the law or as agreed by with your PFA. That's one. So even if you are earning a very poor salary and they are going to pay 100% of your pension as salary, it is still under the water. So what is important is raise the salary. And there is a need indeed to raise the salary of officers and men of the Nigerian police. It's a no-brainer at all. Now, secondly, the police right now is having multiple avenues for internally generated revenue. It does. Like I said, what the police used to do, in addition to police extra reports and also some other little ways of getting money, there's an opportunity in insecurity in Nigeria. So the deployment of police officers to private individuals and other VIPs, that should be monetized and commercialized adequately. Knowing that the people that are putting their lives on the line for these VIPs and for the rest of us as Nigerians, we need to live comfortably here and when they leave the service. So that revenue.
Where does the administrative fee that is paid by individuals and companies
it has to
to
be
the police?
It has to be one enhanced,
yes,
regularized, commercialized, and made very viable, be made a very veritable source of internal generated revenue for the police force, which they can now deploy to do what the FRSC is doing, deploy to do what all other areas of government are doing that are very comfortable with this pension scheme. That is what needs to be done. And so we're only setting an agenda for the police force to see. This problem you want to solve can be solved outside of this proposition you are doing now before the National Assembly. Look inwards.
And in the confines of the existing pension
because
scheme.
the way the Pension Reform Act was designed, it wasn't cast on iron, knowing that it's an organic legislation that will need further reforms going forward, not going backwards. So all we need to look at is within the system, what are the allowable elbow room for maneuvering that can improve on the situation you're trying to solve. Because one thing you can give to the contributory pension scheme is that pension payments are constant.
Okay. Mr. Aguda is back with us now. Mr. Aguda, please take off from where you stopped.
Thank you. So again, like you said, it's constant. When you hear the people agitating, nobody says, I didn't get my pensions. They always say it's not enough. And what we say is that it's a function of your salary. But if they want to move out of the scheme now, it's going to cost the federal government 3.5 trillion naira
To move
today,
out.
and to move out because of the pension liabilities that will cause. Because you have to put that money aside and you need to generate at least 10% every year in order to meet the liabilities. And currently, maybe there are about 400,000 police officers. And as we have heard, perhaps it's not enough for the country. So if we're going to go to 500, 600,000, amount will balloon, that 3.5 trillion naira will balloon. So where is the government going to get that from? Okay, you say they let the government borrow, but if the government borrows, the inflation goes up. If the inflation goes up, at that point, it doesn't matter whether you are receiving 1 million as your pension per month. It's still not going to be enough because the inflation is going to be enough. So what we are saying is we need to think logically, we need to think holistically, and we need to think with the benefits of the officers in mind. Like Mr. Dahiro has said, all of us are agreed that the welfare of the police is very important. When I drive past a police officer, I always sit down, stop, gist with them, ask them how they're doing, how their pensions are doing. And it's typically tales of woe. Their salaries need to go up. They need to augment their pension. The police hierarchy needs to augment their pensions and their retirement benefits as other people do and is allowed under the law. But if they pull out, it's going to destabilize a number of things because the police pension, the MPF pension limited that is managing the assets at the moment, their funds is not just sitting down in the banks. It's invested in bonds, it's invested in infrastructure funds, it's invested in commercial papers. If they want to move out and they want to unwind those investment positions, it will cause what I call a financial Armageddon, meaning that rates will fall down. Even international organizations will, downgrade Nigeria because they are seeing that we're pulling out trillions of naira from our investments. We're unwinding assets. So it's really going to be a financial Armageddon if they do pull out because it's not implementable. To be honest, it's not implementable from what I've seen on the bill.
Okay, Mr. Olatuyi, a question arises. Supposing this bill goes through and a police pension board is put in place, and given what we know of what the previous situation was, does the police force at the moment have the capacity and the infrastructure to manage its own pension scheme?
I think already the points have been made. One, there's, like Professor Adeniyi said, there are weak institutions to even manage ourselves. There's corruption that has not been talked about, which was, of course, grounded the first scheme when it came, and you introduced it. You have
billions
not
of naira that went into private
pockets at the end of the day, which no one has been, criminalized or, punished for. So weak institution, corruption is there. And you see the lack of trust has not also been dealt with. Now, like Mr. Sedu said, the 40% contribution that we're talking about, as far as the contributory pension scheme is concerned, what you are receiving at the end of your retirement is almost the same thing that, even if this pension board comes, it's almost the same thing if salaries are not increased. So, but in terms of regularity and consistency of payment, there, yes. Sustainability of that. You can have that under the,
contributory pension.
You can have that under the policy. But you cannot guarantee that even with this police pension board bill that they are proposing. Because already, as the fact has been stated, the consolidated revenue fund is overstretched. And like our guest from Lagos said, there may be some years because the consolidation is also tied to budget. What if, in 1 year, 2 years, payments are not.
There's a drop in crude oil revenue.
There's a drop in crude oil, that means then there's drop in revenue, And like it's already been stated, as far as this program is concerned, most of the fundings by government for salary, for gratuity, for pension, is drawn on loans, borrowing. So the more we borrow, the more, liabilities and the more inability for government to meet its, constitutional obligations. So the attractiveness in, we want this thing so that, it can, when the police pension board bill, if it passes through, then probably we can, because it's tied to consolidated fund, we can have more money. That will not work at the end of the day, because then, that is also fluid, depending on,
Subject
certain
availability of
of funds. So you are still back to square one.
Yes.
So unless we are realistic enough to say, okay, yes, take the bold step, increase the salaries, so that at the end of the day, what you are collecting, even if it's, going to be a percentage, that percentage will be able to, cater for your welfare, even after your service, after your years of service in the police force. Because apparently, we also know that, economic downturn can come in, inflation can go in. So if you are receiving 2,000, I'm just giving an example,
Exactly.
2,000 naira now salary, that means if you have 20% of that, that's about 200 naira. Now, if inflation grows, that means that 200 that you'll be receiving in the next 5 years might not be able to really take you anywhere. So, which makes a lot of sense, really, if at the end of the day you are clamoring for, you want to have. But instead of, going away from system that work, let's look internally. You have said it. Look at police talk. We talk about internally generated revenue. The police is generating a lot of revenue. They can work hard on that, or work harder. On that, they can, if you want to go to any police station now, you want to do any administrative work, you have to pay for it. Services like, VIP, security and all, they pay for it. But then where does this money go?
Exactly. It needs to be regularized.
It needs to be regularized,
for the benefit of the system.
For the benefits of the system, so that the system can be strengthened,
Yes.
To take care of itself,
Exactly.
not only while guys are in service, but also when they are out of service. When you are in service and you see that people that are outside the service are already, penuried, suffering, when you are still there, you want to make a way for yourself. So it could lead you, demotivate you to even working with criminals against the populace and citizenry that you are supposed to be protecting in the first place.
Okay, Professor Adeni, let's quickly look at this before we wrap up this discussion. Now, we have talked about the existing contributory pension scheme. And this bill, how consistent is it with the provisions of the 2004 and amended 2014 Pension Reform Act?
Yeah, Mark, I think it's been a very educating, illuminating conversation so far. And I think a couple of things I would just want to add. First is that I want to suspect that the originators or the sponsors of this bill are trying to draw a corollary with the Military Pensions Board, imagining that, if the military can have their own, why not the police, But of course, they probably also didn't look at the context within which each institution is operating and what led to the independence of the military, as the case could be, with respect to the pension board system. And it also will lead us to the argument that before we imagine things, before we conceive things, we should be inward looking and not be thinking of aping and idolizing similarities in cases where they are not necessarily appropriate. And that's what I think has hallmarked the theme of the discussion so far, from the analysis of the panelists on your team, as the case could be. And of course, secondly, Mark, I also imagine that um, we are not too good in sustenance, in consistency in our climb, and it leads us to needing to recreate or to reinvent the wheel even when the need does not arise. And if you look at it, even with our system, our structures, we're very poor in maintenance. We always think of creating structures, in the attempt to manage an existing structure or to improve on an existing structure. And that's why you see ministries and agencies mushrooming every day, multiplying every day in situations where one or two, could handle the responsibilities, the duties of maybe two or three agencies, So when you have these multiplicities faced with poor human resources, of course, you have a declining situation. inefficiency all over the place, incapacities all over the place. This is the overarching picture we also have to think about, while continuing with this discussion. What has happened to sustenance? What has happened to our determination to be consistent, to be reform-minded, to be development-oriented, without thinking of reinventing the wheel, recreating structures, systems that are simply replicating what is in existence instead of growing what it is in existence. Now,
All right.
references have been made to other parts of the world, if I still have time, other parts of the world, and I know when you are in some other parts of the world and you see the police, you admire them. Is it their sartorial elegance? Is it their professionalism? Is it their skills and all of that? There's nothing wrong. Nothing is saying that we cannot replicate that here. But of course, if we look at those systems too, they've been consistent over the years, not unnecessarily duplicating functions, on account of trying to improve an existing one. This is the philosophical foundation I think should be in our minds, while we look forward to the next step that the National Assembly will take, as the case could be. Otherwise,
Professor Adeni, we must go. I'm sure that members of the National Assembly are
yeah.
watching and listening and may indeed have the benefit of the professional and specialist views that have been expressed on this program, so as to be able to make very informed inputs into that bill, if it must go through or if it has to be jettisoned. I want to thank you immensely for coming on the program, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, communication specialist at Based University here in the nation's capital. Thank you for your time. And of course, here in the studio, we have Jide Olatui, Executive Director, Policy Consult. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
And Mr. Dr. Mojid Dahiru, a public intellectual and analyst. Thank you so much for your views. And of course, Mr. Oguche Aguda. He joined us all the way from Lagos. He's the CEO, Pension Fund Operators Association. Thank you so much, Mr. Aguda, for your time. All right, that's our program for today. But just before we go, we'd like to ask you, what have you done for Nigeria today? What are you planning to make Nigeria a better place for all? It is not enough to keep criticizing and shouting at the top of our voices over government policies and programs. We must also think of how we can contribute to making Nigeria a better place. My name is Imoni Amarere. Bye for now. I'll see you again when we bring you a fresh edition of the program.